And so can you see my screen?
Yes.
That's terrific. So I think, as you know, mission moment tonight, let's just stick with the mission, which is to empower our kids as scholars and citizens they may lead fulfilling lives. Often that means sort of meeting families where they're at, particularly during tough times. And so I put this forward. Actually, Jake brought this to my attention on GoFundMe, but we do have a family right now in our sixth grade. Let me get Marion back in here. Who recently experienced a fire and is now living in a hotel. Their home is no longer, and so tough. This is a sixth grader, his mother, and a brother, I believe. And so two teachers, our middle school science chair and our sixth grade math teacher, who's also our grade level leader, put together a GoFundMe campaign to raise some funding for this family just to help out. And so I think the idea is for them right now, they're living in a hotel and we'll be back. They're sort of saving up and we'll be back in a new place come the next month in March. And so I would just put this forward. I think thus far, just under $3,000 has been raised. And so a good number of folks have given and it's important. So we're as a community reaching out and seeing what we can make happen for this family so that this hardship is resolved for them as smoothly as can be. So I ask if you do have an opportunity to give, that you do so. I can throw in the link. I can throw in the chat right now the link in case you are interested and want to save it. Let's see. And there it is. And so in addition to that, there are a number of events going on at the school over the course of the spring that I think are fun and things that you all can take part in. So I wanted to provide a couple of save the dates going back to our agenda. So let me get out of here and go to, all right, you should all now see, can you all see the school leader monthly report now? Terrific, got it. Meeting, this meeting, got it, okay. And so there are two events coming up. There is a career fair coming up on March 25th. So we'll send an invite out to y'all. I don't have the times exactly yet, but a fun event where we in the past have had 40 different guests come in and provide their experience to our kids on what they do, why they like their job, how they got there, what's really fascinating about it, and then kids having lots of questions, and then leave wanting to perhaps pursue that career even more so. So it's a fun event, and so if you're able to take part, we'll provide a save the date, and I'll reach out to you one more time with other specifics on it. But that's March 25th. In addition to that, we have a college signing day coming up on April 29th, and that's just an opportunity to celebrate our kids and their exciting news of signing into and enrolling in college. And so a couple of big events, and so would love for you all to engage and take part if you're able to. And so these initiatives and events are all meaningful to kids as they engage in a Unity education. So with that, that's mission moment tonight. Any questions about either of these events before we move on? Cool. So I think, Marion, you get to run point with regard to facilitation tonight on the agenda. And so that's mission moment. We can move on to school leader report if that makes sense.
That does, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So a couple of updates here and there coming out of this more lengthy report. It's lengthier because there's been a lot that's gone on over the past few weeks since the last time we met. And so I think I'll start with just that, and I mentioned this on a couple of calls over the past week. We're back in school. It's hard to believe that 4 weeks ago we were talking deeply about safety protocols, return to school, et cetera, et cetera. A lot has happened over the past few weeks, and a lot of it is focused on teaching and learning and the importance of that. So I am feeling good about the ability to focus on that without kind of being distracted by some of the other things that we weren't really built for as a school. So that's been the past few weeks, just being able to engage in everything school related and what goes on in classrooms and everything around it to support that. With regard to specifics on the safety front, I'll just provide some updates, which I did to the SLC last week. We've had a slight uptick in the number of confirmed vaccinations at the school. We're still testing 20% of our kids each week randomly at both sites. Since the 18th, just to give you a sense of numbers, we've had approximately 12 student confirmed cases. And with each of these cases, because of our test to stay policy, those students who have tested positive are quarantining, obviously. And then the students who were close contacts in the past, they would have quarantined for up to a certain number of days. Now, assuming they don't have symptoms, can return to school. And so I think as a result of that, we've had school going much more seamlessly than what we were experiencing in December and in early January. So this is good. I think with regard to staff, we've had maybe 2 or 3 cases here and there. And so things seem to be on the up and up. Moving into other updates, I would say with just staffing right now, we are lean overall with a couple of vacancies across both sites and then some folks who are out on leave for various reasons, but managing and doing quite well. And so I imagine at this point in time, we're going to be doing less sort of thinking about hiring for openings at this point and covering those openings internally. And more of our focus now is in thinking about putting forth the best team, recruiting, retaining the best team for 22-23. So that's where we are staffing. Much more to say on the staffing front at other portions of tonight's meeting. Academically, it's been a busy month of testing with STAR, with IAs at the high school, with mock exams at the middle school. And so we'll be doing some reporting out tonight on some of the results of those assessments, with more to come in the coming month. From a sort of extracurricular and climate standpoint, we're back in action. So we closed some things down for a few weeks in early January. We've had a host of events over the past month. It's Black History Month this month, so we're celebrating that fully. Extracurricular right now, the athletic season for winter sports is fully in it. So kids have been making up some games that were rescheduled from January. Again, school feels like school, feels good. Those are the updates I want to flag for the full team tonight. Are there any questions, any clarifications I can make with recent headlines? Cool. So beyond that, we're gonna get to essentially every portion of what was included in the school leader report. That includes a deep dive into retention forecasts, which I'll get into, and so that'll come up soon. Other updates here would be, I'm going to talk about graduation forecasts come the SLC portion of the meeting tonight. And I think with that, I'll leave off there. So again, we'll get to most of the other sections of this report throughout the meeting tonight. Unless folks have specific questions that I can address now, we'll move things forward. And here's Lenny.
Yeah, let's keep going unless anybody has any questions.
Great. Cool. Hey, Lenny.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm well.
Good. Thanks for joining us tonight on the call. We've got Melissa Duffney, we've got Chris Dosher. Alex will join us at some point in time. She's our director of finance. We've got Sal and Jeanette and Earl and Marion also on the call tonight. So intimate group. A couple of folks are out just with competing commitments. And what we've just done is reviewed. We do a mission moment at the front of the meeting, and then we're now into the second agenda item, which is the school leader report. And now moving on from that to our data dashboard. So I sent that out just about an hour ago. I'd forgotten to include that in our folder. So there are 5 or 6, I think, highlights I want to provide there. So let me do that. Give me 1 second to reshare my screen. Okay. All right, so I want to begin with table one, and that is just an update on student enrollment at this time. I think the headlines here just that we've remained steady at 95% enrollment of our targeted enrollment, and that's at 546. We're up one over the past month. If you look at the table here, you'll see our likely enrollment, as there's always a little bit of deviation in comparison to sort of ATS and what's on file with the DOE. We're light in the sixth grade by a few. Seventh grade, we've had a hard time sort of like backfilling in that area. And then in the 12th grade, we're a little light in comparison to what we thought we would be at as of the beginning of this year. In other grades, we're fairly healthy. So that's where things stand. As I said, I guess last month, we're focusing less on backfilling. We will continue to do it and market and publicize somewhat, but most of our efforts right now are thinking about next year and our recruitment for 22-23.
Hey, Josh, just a quick question, and I'm probably reading this wrong, so forgive me, but
Yeah.
how are we light in 12th grade, but 7 kids on the wait list?
No, I think it's a good question. We just 12th grade is a year in which we tend not to backfill.
Okay.
Because it's so close to graduation.
Okay.
So in addition to table one, and just many of the tables that are highlighted green at the top are the ones that are typically updated. Others are here just for reference, but may not be updated each and every month. So I'm skipping over a few that matter less. We'll talk about finance with Alex soon. Student attendance right now, let's see. So we're at 87% overall as a school. There has been a bit of a dip, I think, likely due to some of the remote stuff that was going on in early January, where our attendance was high, relatively speaking, but not as high as we are when we're in person. And so I'm not concerned about that. We're continuing to make moves to see and promote strong attendance at the school. We're probably 4 percentage points off of where we are in a normal year. And so I think given the health concerns, I'm okay with this. There is a new table that I included that's 5B, and that gives, I think, a deeper sense of attendance and the degree to which we should be intervening within certain subsets of our student population. And so specifically, I've got 3 tiers of students within this table. Our tier 1 students are our students that now have attendance of 90% or above. We want to maximize that. We'd love for 100% of our students to be there. Tier 2 are students who have attendance between 80 and 89%. And so kind of like a yellow flag for us with regard to like where they are. And so there are meaningful things we're doing to support them. And then those who are chronically absent below 80%. And that's where a lot of the work of our social work team comes into play. So I'm interested in looking at changes by month in these values. And the goal here is to reduce the percentage of students that have attendance below 80%. I think given the way in which we're structured as a school and the supports we have in place, a healthier percentage, one that we can work within, would be something closer to 10 to 15%. And so we're heavy right now in this area. And so our team has been very busy in supporting students who aren't in school and perhaps with our help could see improvements. In a typical year,
is your sense that this is, some kids sort of never there, or most of that cohort misses 1 day a week, or is it hard kind of all over the map?
Yeah, no, good question. It varies. We do have our students who are rarely in school. And so there are different interventions in play that our social work team executes, implements for those students, and their students who may miss, 2.5 days every 10 days of school, which puts them just below 80%. And so different interventions at play for those 2 groups. In a typical year, we would expect for attendance of 90% above to be reflected by about 75% of our students. So we do have students more so this year because of the pandemic that might have 85, 86% attendance rather than 90 in a typical year. So this is, I think, a good table to track and be aware of each month. Again, with the goal of reducing the percentage of students in tier 2 and 3. So next month you'll see some values of change in the empty columns. Any other questions here with this new one? Cool. So beyond that, let's see, that was table 5B. I want to look at table 7. Oh, no, let's look at table 6 with suspensions. We haven't talked about suspensions. It's one of the values we tend to just be aware of when it comes to like school climate. Goal this year is to have fewer than 12% unique suspensions across sites. Right now, just beyond the mid-year mark, we are at 6%. So I think we're on target with regard to wanting to manage suspension. It is a last resort for us and mainly about safety. When we feel like safety is at risk, we will use it. And so you get a sense of like, a lot of these have been due to physical altercations beyond the building. So it's rare something would happen in the building, something may happen after school. We may hear about it down the street through social media, et cetera. But that's where a majority of the suspensions have been administered. In a couple of occasions, we've had some bullying via social media. And then we've had some cases involving, at the high school, at least illegal substances. And so I think that kind of like gives you a sense of the nature of the infractions that we see as warranting suspension. And I think with the illegal substances, it's more of a perhaps issue or concern about distribution.
So Josh, does this imply that each of those categories constitute a unique suspension? And if not, what is a unique suspension?
So unique would be if a student has been suspended on multiple occasions, they aren't counted multiple times. So this would be unique students. So if a student is suspended once, they're reflected here. If a student is suspended 3 times for different things, they're represented 1 time here. And that's the way in which the sort of DOE tends to sort of reflect this data. And so we're following suit.
I'm sorry, say that one more time. What constitutes a unique suspension? I'm sorry.
But it's just defined as a unique suspension would be a student being suspended at least 1 time.
Okay, got it. That's what I thought. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So we'll move things forward. So student recruitment, we're now in high season here. And so just to orient you to this table, we've got grades in the first column with some totals at the bottom. Our target enrollment for 22-23 is listed in the second column. So in the 6th grade, we'd like to have 96 students enrolled in our school. In terms of students who are returning, based on what we know now, we've included that. And so we would look to backfill if there's a difference between our target enrollment and our anticipated enrollment. And so that's what the next column 4 presents, the number of seats that are likely to be open. And then we report out on the number of applications received thus far. And I think as a comparison point, what's helpful is we're comparing that to where we were last year at the same time. So 55 applications for our 6th grade as of last week. That compares with 64 last year at the same time. So we're down 9 applications from where we were last year. And so with that information, we can say, hey, look, we got to turn it up. There's some things that we should think about differently, or we're in good standing given where we were last year and where we ended up. So again, a nice comparison point. In terms of moves right now, so that this -9 disappears and becomes something positive where we're like ahead of the game. And Chris, you can add in if you like, but we have identified about 1,000 5th grade students within a certain radius of our middle school and have provided direct mailings to those students, a gift, information about the school, et cetera. And Chris and Kamu, who both sort of manage recruitment, are now making calls, follow-up calls to those families. And so this is happening sooner than we did last year, and we've widened the net and increased the number of students who we're sending this mailing to. So I think that to me, it worked well last year. We had close to 90 students enrolled in our sixth grade, which was a big improvement over the prior year. And so we expect that to be fruitful this year too.
Do you have a rough sense, Josh, of how many applications you need or what your yield is basically? Like how many people you churn through before you fill your class?
Yeah, Chris, what would you say?
Yeah, my goal is 300 for the lottery. Our sixth grade this year is slightly shorter. We had just under 300 applications this year. So we've got a 300 application goal for the lottery and a 400 application goal by the beginning of summer.
And that's just the sixth grade, right?
Right.
What about the other grades? Are the numbers too small because you're only sort of filling a gap?
So in the ninth grade, we've got about, I don't know what we have, with top.
Yeah, ninth grade doesn't look worrisome. You got plenty of applications for a small number of slots open. Right?
Exactly. And so it's possible we may fill our ninth grade with Unity students only if our yield from our eighth grade at Unity is high. So that's good. So it's really just sixth grade. And then we've got a gap in our seventh grade moving into eighth. And so one of the things that Chris and Camille are doing to backfill in that grade so that we're healthier and that our seats are being utilized is to expand that mailing to also include a smaller number of kids who live nearby who are in the seventh grade now and get them in the eighth grade next year.
Okay.
So when you talk about your catchment area, is that defined by a radius?
Yeah.
Outside of the middle school, or is it defined by zip codes or a combination of both?
Yeah. Chris, I'll let you field that.
Students who are attending nearby elementary schools, fifth grade. And we're partnering with especially charter elementary schools, Brooklyn Charter School, Cultural Arts Academy, New American Academy. So these are charter elementary schools that have a similar structure, mission to Unity. So we're directly partnering with them. So we're bringing their alumni back to their school, be like, hey, this is how your middle schoolers are doing. And we're inviting their admin into our space. So it creates a direct feeder program between those charter elementary schools and us. And we're building up relationships with some DOE schools as well.
So primarily through a self-defined network. And then how many applications do you get outside of that network because of word of mouth? The ballpark, you don't have to be specific, but ballpark.
I would say from word of mouth, maybe about 10 to 20%. So the vast majority are coming from those network of schools that we're building relationships with and references directly from those elementary school counselors. It's a big piece of it.
And so we do have families who live outside of that radius, and we do offer buses privately for those families.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to dive deeply into staff retention momentarily as a part of the strategic part of the meeting tonight. And then with staff recruitment, I'll include that or update that next month. From a development standpoint, right now, year to date, we've raised just over 32,000 with 27 donors. So we've gone light with regard to like the work here. There's been a lot on our plates this year, and I think we're kind of healthy right now. And so this hasn't been a priority, but here's where things stand with regard to giving. We had $2,000 donated to school over the past month. With regard to participation in extracurriculars and SPED compliance, I'll also provide some updates next month there. In general, no concerns here. We're in good standing. So I've prioritized the things that I think are most important to discuss tonight. Last table 15 was student vaccinations. As I said, just over a third of our students have been vaccinated. That's verified. At the high school, we're just at about the 50% mark at this point in time. Fewer students at the middle school. And so I think our initiatives have continued as is, although the case rates are much lower than they were a month ago. So that's a good sign. But as I said, we are continuing to test on site randomly. About 20% of our students, 95% of our students have opted into that testing. So much more than a typical DOE school. And we continue to sort of make the message clear that like the best defense right now for family, kids, school, the safety is to get vaccinated. So that's present. Those are the updates I have for this dashboard this month. Are there any insights, questions, considerations for the coming month?
When's the break, Josh?
Friday afternoon it begins.
Okay.
So I think we'll move on now. Next agenda item would be strategic planning. So I think within this portion of the meeting tonight, I want to talk about retention and our forecast for staff going into 22-23, given a survey that we administered just this past month. And so was able to talk with Madonna and Jake and Jeanette about this on Thursday of last week. So let's move into that. And I'm going to use the school meter report rather than the SLC slides, just because I think we don't have to go quite as detailed as what was discussed on Thursday, although I'm happy to if it makes sense. Jeanette, let me know if you think it does make sense. So here's some just updates. I'm going to talk you through both our process for getting information about staff on their plans for the coming year, and then what we do with it, and then how it compares with prior years, so we have a sense of like where do we stand, and what does that mean for hiring, and then future work. So in mid-January each year, we formally gain information on staff via a survey on their plans for the following year. It's an early take, and so things don't always work out exactly as conveyed in January, but roughly it's a pretty good indicator of what's to come. And so in that survey, staff are asked if they're coming back, and their answer can be yes, maybe no, or no. And then there's a follow-up question about, what in your mind would raise you one, from maybe yes to yes, from maybe no to yes, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're able to get some fairly detailed information individualized on each person and what their needs and aspirations are for the coming year. So I'm going to share out just 2 data points. I'll talk through the findings and then our kind of action steps based on this. And so again, you see this in the school report that was sent out yesterday. So this is a summary. This first table is a summary of the overall responses, and I offered by site. And then there are a few of us who are kind of split site, get to work at both the middle school and high school. Chris, Melissa, myself, Alex, a few others. And so in general, key findings are as follows. We had 87% of our staff report yes or maybe yes, which is on par with prior years. And so you see that sort of here with regard to the percentages. And so you have the numbers here. You've got the percentages for all. It's then broken up by site in these next 2 columns. And then, as I said, the split site folks here. So you have a sense of the breakdown. So the yes rate is a little lower than in previous years. So we expect that retention could be slightly lower. Getting this information positions us to have conversations with people about aspirations. And for those folks who we are eager to have back, we invite and welcome those. So that sets us up to perhaps influence these rates in positive ways that are best for kids. We've got more maybes this year than in prior years, which I think is likely the case for all people who work around kind of like what they're thinking about coming out of the pandemic and stepping back and saying, hey, what brings me fulfillment? What brings me joy in the work? And so I think we see that here in our data. The no rate is 5% across the board, and I think that's on par with prior years. So nothing different about this year. And I think for folks who are working across sites, similar sort of data. For those in the middle school and high school, there isn't a huge difference between the two. And I would just say that even over the past 2 weeks, there's been some changes with regard to responses due to conversations had. So I think that's good.
Your last
That was
point,
us.
Josh, about changes in the past, how good of a predictor has this been? I mean, I know this is different with pandemic and everything. But.
Yeah, so we talked a bit about this on Thursday. And so, Michelle did some background work on kind of like what the forecasts as of last year were versus what the actual numbers were coming into the year. And her conclusion is that the maybes, the maybe yeses to maybe nos, there isn't a huge difference with regard to what actually happens. So maybes, maybe. And so I guess that would be the key finding or key sort of note in response to your question. Does that answer it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it means you gotta, target your efforts on the maybe pool to the extent these are people you want to retain, yeah.
Yep, exactly. Any other questions about this table or of the key findings before moving into one other table, and then some conclusions? What's good about this data? What perhaps are what's challenging, and then some action steps. I'll move us forward then. So second table provides survey responses by general position at the school, specifically teachers and admin. And so admin would be, in some cases, folks who are holding managerial roles at the school, an instructional coach, but also maybe teaching partly. So that would be one distinction I'd make here. And then admin would also cover operational folks, administrators in leadership and senior leadership, et cetera. Teachers include those who are teaching full-time. So I think findings here are just that the rates are not significantly different across the two different groups and in line with the overall values. The admin retention is predicted to be a bit lower than in previous years. I attribute this partly to just like the work of admin being especially hard this year, just keeping things together, making decisions about stuff that's very new to school, just being a stressful year for people, particularly those who are managing others. And so that shows in the data, I think. And let's see here. As I said before, there's been some movement in these values already, I think in a favorable fashion for those who we've been able to sit down with. And so those conversations continue. Any clarifying questions about the data provided here? Cool. So as I said, we spliced this in a few other ways that we talked about during Thursday's call with SLC. I don't feel to bring those to the full board tonight. So this is a bit more condensed in terms of what I'm reporting out. In terms of bright spots here, just that we've got good data. It's good to have this information early so that we can engage folks in open conversation about like things that we might be able to do to get them fired up and excited about their return to our school next year. In some cases, it's about having a conversation with a teacher who is aspiring to be a leader, and us and being able to think about the way in which that might happen over some time to set them up to see that through. And so those are always exciting conversations to have with people. Let's see. And so I think other bright spots include that, as I said before, we've got relatively few folks who have said, I'm not returning this year, and that's a good sign, and that the conversations thus far have been fruitful. Challenges for this year include that we do have a slightly lower projected retention rate than the prior year. I think if we did nothing with this data and didn't have any conversations, we'd be looking at perhaps a retention rate of 65% versus 80% last year. And so this positions us well to maximize retention among those folks who we believe are really good for school, good for kids. In terms of the factors at play coming from the open response questions in the survey, salary is probably the most significant factor. We're going to talk about salary and compensation a bit during the executive committee meeting tonight. Growth trajectories over one's career come up often. And then there are some external factors which may be outside our control, although conversations about them are helpful. And so if someone's planning to move out of state, there's only so much we can do there, but we do engage in conversation about perhaps what things they might need that might, if put in place, keep them in state. So those are the factors at play. In terms of our actions, we collected these responses and are analyzing them through different lenses. And so even looking at, folks who are teaching in our crucial subjects, teaching Regents courses at the high school, teaching tested subjects in middle school, having a sense of where retention stands there versus other subjects. We looked at those sorts of things, so we'll continue to do so. I'm Melissa. Anyone who's supervising others is now taking part in engaging in conversations with educators, administrators about their interests in the coming year, and those will continue. We got a couple tomorrow. And then with regard to salary, I have been looking at some possible updates to where we are now versus where we've been in prior years, as we haven't updated things in some time. So again, more to say there later on in this meeting. So I think those are the key takeaways. I'd like to know from this team whether you see these takeaways as the right ones, or whether there are other recommendations or considerations you see coming from this data. Are we doing the right things? That would be another question that I'd love to hear people's take on.
When do you need to pull the trigger on recruiting?
When someone says no, and there's a definite confirmed vacancy.
I understand that, but ideally, when in the year would you have the right pool of people to pick?
You've already started, right? For some.
Yeah. So we've got an interview tomorrow at the middle school. Like we're beginning that process. We posted job descriptions on our site and on some of the venues we use back in December. We've re-upped those, and then we'll add to them as we confirm openings throughout. So it's happening right now.
Okay.
And like in terms of like the busy season, I think March and April is where things get really busy. I get a little nervous in May and June. Do
you try to get the maybes to move into one column or the other sort of over the next month or so you still have a good window, or how does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, so as a small school where we know folks well, it's an honest conversation of like, hey, we love to have you back, and we're excited that these are the things that you need in place. If we can shake hands on those now, we do. If we can't, we might say let's kind of sit back down in a month. Or if things are still up in the air, it might be like, hey, you know that our job is to make sure that we've got the best team possible moving into the coming year. And so with you as a maybe, we're going to post your position and know that we're not going to make any decisions until we circle back with you.
Okay, fair enough.
So I think that is the strategy. And so in thinking about sort of staffing for the coming year, it's a big one. So I think we can move on from that and move into the committee reports. And the first one here would be AFC. Alex, welcome. How are you doing?
Hi, everybody. I am well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Do you want to share your screen tonight? I know we've got kind of it's a quick kind of update.
It is. I'm happy to share my screen. It's very brief, nothing notable since the last reporting period.
Let's see. So why don't I let you do that?
Okay.
Actually, for some reason, when we move into this form, can't do that. Chris, you able to do that?
Yeah, we got it.
Thanks.
So anticlimactic, all this effort.
And I think, Alex, you've met everyone. I don't know if you've met Lenny Singletary yet, and Alex Poole, our Director of Finance.
I have not. Hi. Always nice to see new faces. So this is going to be the financial report ending in December. So this is about halfway through the year. No notable events since our last reporting period. As you can see, our near-term indicators and sustainability indicators are well within range. We do see the variance in enrollment, but we captured that at the beginning of the year, and it will stay with us until the end of the reporting period. As far as full year revenues, we are still projecting a pretty significant surplus due to the additional grant funding through ARP, ESSER, ESSER 2, and the other CARES Act grants that came in last year, this year, and will carry forward. But this table, again, we're reporting actual enrollment at 521. That has stayed pretty stable over the last few months. So we see the variance in enrollment. Again, it's stable month to month. Skip the balance sheet. So you'll see on the profit and loss, right now our total net income is just over $2 million compared to where we budgeted at 900,000. And again, this is the grant support. If we back the grants out and that support, we would adjust the net income and we would see a net income of 477 compared to that 900, which is consistent with that enrollment variance. Moving on to cash, we continue to be healthy for the next several months. I do these projections out more than 3 months, but I find it just easier to just show the current 3 months. So nothing notable, nothing concerning. We will likely have a single federal audit this year because of our grant support, which is something different for Unity, but MMB is wonderful and will walk us through all of that and shouldn't be extra work, but will be a little bit different for this time around. Were there any questions on any of the specific pages or?
And so I think this report is similar to last month's report out. Lenny, some of this is new to you. Do you have any specific questions or input based on what Alex has presented?
Yeah, so in fairness, it's kind of quick, which
Yeah.
is no fault of Alex. You know, being a finance guy in my previous life, I like to dig a little deeper, but it makes sense. I'm
Cool.
good.
Well, and by all means, you know, after you review the reports, if there are very specific questions or a level of detail that isn't going to be captured, you know, at this meeting, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to answer any supplemental questions or just, you know, out of curiosities that you might have.
Yeah,
We always welcome more AFC members.
I was going to say, even, I mean, we do welcome more AFC members, but also if you just want to listen in on the AFC meeting, we can totally send you the invite, even if you don't formally join the committee. So,
yeah, so when I finish looking at the materials, if I may have 1 or 2 questions, but it makes sense. It just flows. I'm just looking at it rather quickly. That's all.
So that's what I've got on that.
So, let's see. I think, Lenny, what I would say, like the headlines are that because of some of the COVID federal funding, this year is kind of a different year with regard to what shows up financially, and we're in good form. Operationally, we're down about 10 students from where we'd like to be budget-wise, and so that has an impact operationally in our budget of about $300,000. It's like that's the sort of challenge, and so I think enrollment's down across the city overall. So some of this is sort of like just what's happening. I've heard some updates recently about even one network school in Bed-Stuy closing down at the end of this year in middle school, which surprises me because it's a pretty well-known network school. But like, I just think that this is the reality with regard to just fewer students and then more schools that are competing for students.
are you reaching out to their students, Josh, or is it not the right target population?
We are to the extent that we can, because they're in the same neighborhood as many of our kids.
Yeah, and the other thing I would just say for Lenny is that we're way above the cash metric. We used to kind of hover over our target that was 90 days because we got a PPP loan, you know, shooting that up. So we're going to be meaningfully over for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, this is unlike any other metrics I see with other schools, either parochial or public or charter. It's a unique period because there's some that are excelling because of the environment, cash wise. There are others who are having challenges staying open, similar to the previous example you gave. Let's go hard with that. And then, you know, I think parents have different choices, and you know, sometimes what I've observed is that enrollment will have a direct impact on how many people decide to move outside of the boroughs. So it's a lot of factors. I get it. It looks like our numbers are good, but it's nice to have the baseline of what we historically looked like before I became a member of the board. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Yep. Great. So I think the next report out just on the agenda would be the DFC, and we actually just did an email meeting this past meeting, so it wasn't just as much to report out on. But the update is that with regard to portable classrooms, they've been installed and electrical work has been done. Furniture may have been delivered today. We would then need for a final inspection, and then they're ready for staff and student use. So we've got a schedule by period for how those 3 classrooms will be used. And I think from my vantage point, I saw this as a win because I know that like this was a stress point for staff. We're just tight on space, particularly in a year in which distancing has been important safety-wise. And so I saw a win just being that like, okay, we've got more space. But now when I look at the way in which we're using it, there's like some significant improvements in the way in which we can serve kids with these new spaces. So I'm excited.
So 2 questions. One, what is a portable classroom? And 2, is it applied at the middle school or the high school or both?
Good question. So middle school, we've got ample space. It's a big old building with all the amenities one would need, traditional building. Private high school space, you've been to the building. I think you were in 204, I think 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We are heavily enrolled at the high school, and our classrooms are small. And so at the beginning of the year with social distancing, where that was a real concern, it's lessened to some degree more recently, we had to space things out. And so we were using classrooms. Essentially, there were maybe 2 openings over the course of the day of our 13 classrooms. And like usually there's a little more flex with regard to a schedule than that. And then that was especially hindering for our students with special needs in small group pull-out spaces where we were using kind of common spaces to make that happen. It just wasn't as good as it could be, wasn't as private, wasn't as focused, et cetera. And so we'll be using these spaces, especially for that use. And the classrooms, they're nice. They're actually really nice. They're brand new trailers, and there are 2 smaller ones and 1 bigger one. They come fully furnished. They come with AC, air conditioning, et cetera. I've seen them used at a number of private schools in Riverdale, and no bathrooms, but we'll use the bathrooms on our school site where a typical student using those rooms would be there for 1 period and then come back to our main building. The distance between the trailers and our school is maybe 10 yards. So it's just in the parking lot out back. And we're renting the parking lot by our developer to have this be available.
Thank you. That's helpful.
It's a creative solution. And we're a bit late. We thought this would be sooner, but maybe that was naive because these things take time in New York City. So with regard to ECPC and report out of that committee, on Tuesday, we revisited our goals as a committee for the year. And overall, I think we're in a pretty good place with the 4 or 5 things that we've set out to do. Nothing to kind of bring the full board tonight with regard to that meeting. And so I think the final committee meeting report out would be with the SLC. And there are 2 items we're going to share out on coming from that meeting that we haven't yet talked about. One related to graduation forecasts as of now and where our class of 2022 stands. And then Melissa's going to dive into some academic data coming from some recent assessments. So let me start with graduation forecasts. And I think I can probably just go to the school year report there too. So you have this as an attachment. I'm moving to page. Oops. Sorry if that's dizzying. Here we go. This will be page 6. So graduation forecasts, and this is for using kind of DOE speak, the entry cohort of 2018. And so we do this also each year at different points in time, just to get a sense of where things stand so that we're able to, graduation rates are important for obvious reasons for kids. They open doors either with regard to career and or college. We've, with our first 2 cohorts, have had fairly successful, strong graduation rates. And so we want to see that continue. And so getting a sense of where we are now is important. It sets us up then to make the right moves and support in the right ways so that as many of our kids as possible are experiencing graduation in 4 years. So I think that the headline here is that we're in similar form to where we have been in prior years. And so the table itself offers a breakdown in green of those students that are in good solid form to graduate as of June. And so you'll see I've got the class of 2022 and those forecasts as of February listed here. And so that's 83% of what is a relatively smaller class of about 55 students. And then we can compare that to the class of 2021 that graduated in June this past year, where our graduation rate was 92% overall. At this point in time last year as of December, we had 90% of students in good form, and then some students who were on the cusp, and then some students who were fairly behind, and we were going to support them as much as possible, where perhaps a fifth year would make sense, or an August graduation. And then you also see here the class of 2020 and where things stood as of 2 years ago. So in general, looking across the board, there aren't huge differences. We have more students percentage-wise who are approaching or off track, but we feel good about being able to support them to get back on track. And then we have 2 students right now who are one who's not likely to graduate because of being undercredited. So there's different pathways we are communicating with the student's family on, and that option might be, we do our best to offer as many options as possible for our kids, and even do some work with regard to credits that happen in a less typical way, in an expedited way, but that's not our thing. And there are schools that do that. And so in some cases in the past, we have had kids, if we believe in another school as being an option for them where they can get to where they want to be and families on board, we will provide that consulting. So that's where things stand. We feel pretty good about this in terms of the work. We've got a strong task force of myself and Melissa, our director of college and career readiness, our director of academic counseling, our data manager, and our 12th grade academic counselor, meeting roughly weekly or every 2 weeks, depending on what we see fit, to monitor student progress, devise different sorts of interventions for kids, and troubleshoot where needed. But I think right now I feel good about our last 2 meetings and kind of where we are. And so so our kids are well supported at this point in time.
Josh, I may have been wrong, but I thought there was a year where we had 100% graduation rate. Did that not happen?
2 years ago, I believe we ended up with a graduation rate of 98%.
Okay.
Last year, we had a graduation rate of 92% officially. All students who were on our roster as of June of last year graduated. And so the preliminary numbers I reported out was 100%. And we had 2 or 3 students who had either transferred or were supposed to transfer, or who moved away, were on our roster technically and then didn't graduate as of 4 years. And so that counted toward our graduation rate, which then brought it down to 92%.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I just say that I think with these numbers, what is also different this year, and Jeanette, I'm thinking of you because you always have a good eye on all of our students, including our students with IEPs. We've got a smaller number of students with IEPs in this relatively small class. And so with that, if we've got I think we've got a couple of students who are in yellow right now, maybe one in red. With that, depending on how they end up in June or August, that can change the percentages in a more significant way than in prior years. So our graduation rates over the past 2 years for our students with IEPs have been in the 90s as well, which we're very proud of. This year, we should get there again, but there are a couple of students who are on the cusp. And so with a smaller percentage, that may make the overall graduation rate for that subgroup of students lower than what we've seen before. That was eye-opening for me because I've always sort of looked at the state average overall for students with IEPs and the 4-year graduation being, I think, 65%, 66%. And so I think in some schools that tends to be what happens, small population of students. So, and so if a portion of those students don't graduate, it ends up showing up in the percentages in a more sort of jarring way. So anyway, I put that out there. Are there any considerations with regard to this data? Anything you'd want to sort of put out there? If you're in our shoes, anything that we should be thinking about that perhaps I haven't conveyed? Cool. And Lenny, just having, it's always good to have kind of new perspectives in here. Looking at this, what kind of comes to mind for you, if anything at all? You get to work with schools in the past?
Nothing really comes to mind. It's helpful to know that historically, with the graduation numbers have been so high, because I think that just speaks to what I've always thought on the outside looking in about the curriculum and the way you care about the students. I'm impressed to see that, you know, this ad hoc team has been created to help put a more narrow focus on getting the numbers back, and with the right type of expertise. So those are the things that pop out, you know, at the moment. But aside from that, it's consistent with what I've seen with other schools, and actually in some cases better.
Cool. So I think with that, we're going to jump into report outs on, let's see, middle school STAR exams and then high school IA2s. So Melissa, do you want me to use this document or use what would be helpful? Maybe the slides?
I think the slides are the last thing I looked at, so I think I'll be most efficient there.
Cool, let's do that. All right,
So team, I'll headline what we're going to see. I'm going to try to keep it brief tonight, so there'll be some time for conversation at the end, but I might front load with a bit of talking. We are going to look at two of our big assessment measures that happen mid-year. The first one is our STAR exams at the middle school. Remember, STAR exams are online national reading and math exams that we use, and we're excited about this tool because it's something that we can use year over year in a student's trajectory for their entire 7 years with us. And then we're going to look at our internal interim assessments that roughly map against state exams for high school. So we'll start with STAR exams. Let me orient team to this. STAR exams give a couple of pieces of information. And one of them is that they roughly predict the state proficiency on state exams using state standards, in our case, the Common Core standards. So here is what we're looking at for state proficiency for the reading exam. And this includes proficiency is deemed level 3 and 4, so the green and blue you see. So you can see this in the chart on the left, but you can the graph on the left, but also the chart here on the right. You see our goal here on the far right, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 across the top with the total. And then it's broken down by grade level. So what you see here is that in terms of predicting proficiency in state exams, no middle school grade is at the proficiency goal of 42% yet. Though sixth grade is close at 37%, followed by 7th and 8th grade. An important thing to know is that these state exams are given in late March. Students should be trending towards proficiency the entire year and ultimately meeting proficiency near the end, close to our grade level. So while it would be a beautiful thing to be there already, there is an expectation that students are working towards that. So the next thing we're going to look at is the growth. So this is the average student growth percentile by grade level. So what we've got here on the series of graphs on the left are the, for all students, the average student growth percentile. And then on the right, it's looking at the whole school. with students by IEP status. So we see our 6th grade is in the 49th student growth percentile, 48th and 7th, and 55th in 8th. And then when we look at the average student growth percentile by IEP status, 51% of our students who are not classified our students are at 51 student growth percentile, 51st student growth percentile on average. If students are not classified, and 52% for students who are classified with disability. So big, broad conclusion here is that all grades are growing at average levels, with 8th grade experiencing the highest average SGP. So any questions here on our STAR data snapshot?
Now this is Earl. I assume that none of this is weighted, taking on the consideration of the craziness that these kids are having to deal with, that none of us necessarily have to deal with from an academic perspective. This is just pure raw data, correct?
It is, I'd say the closest thing that we could say how this specific slide we're looking at here is weighted is that it's compared to students across the country. So we know the impact is not equal for students across the country. It doesn't take into account the impact of our students who, you know, are New Yorkers, who are in an urban environment, who may have had more remote school than, say, an elementary school in the South.
Florida.
Florida, exactly. Like it's not taking any of that into account. And above, when we looked at our year-end goals, we set those against our performance and our district's performance in the past. So the absolute measure of performance bands, not weighted at all. The weights of the growth percentiles are only weighted in so much as students' peers are also taking, and we know all children to some degree have been impacted.
Thank you. I just would ask the board member to consider that, because I know we are always very cognizant to assess what we think is the definition of good, bad, but we're doing it based on our own perspective, knowing that none of us have had to learn in this environment.
True. It is definitely a very different landscape, and thank you for helping us contextualize that. But some of the big overall conclusions for this ELA data, none of us are quite there at the proficiency goal of 42%, but we have 6th grade that's close, and then 7th and 8th grade a little bit further behind. But students are growing at average levels, with 8th grade being a little bit above. So given that, that is, I think, a bright spot. And then the average instructional reading level has increased by 4 months for 6th and 8th grades and 2 months for 7th grade. So we see students growing there in the level of text they can access. And then students without IEPs experienced comparable average to students with IEPs. So with the slight edge going to students with IEPs. So that's something we like to keep track of. And we're happy to see that students are growing at comparable rates.
Just to add to what Melissa said, so the 42% target is based on our district and location, CSD 13, and what the district average was back during 2019, the last time kids tested. And so I'm looking at this data now. You had this question, Jeanette, on Thursday. So CSD 13 in 2019, on average, 39% of students scored proficiently or above. So 42 is slightly above, and that's how we came to that number. And then with CSD 16, which is the district in which the heaviest number of our students reside and come from, it's just east of our middle school. The percentage there was 24%. So you get a kind of sense of the variation across different districts of location for the kids that we serve.
Josh, do you have a sense of whether all your kids are going to take the tests or whether some are opting out?
Good question. I I would assume that we'll have 95% of our students test at the middle school.
Okay, thanks.
The other thing I just mentioned is, so from a growth perspective, our target this year is 60, and we're in the kind of, we're at like 50, just beyond 50, depending on grade mark. And that number just represents accelerated growth. If we're serious about making sure our students are ready for high school, and a majority of our kids are coming in below grade level in core skills as of 6th grade, our job is to then provide and ensure that they're growing in an accelerated fashion, in a responsible fashion. And so we feel like 60 right now makes that. So we're just under that. But these values right now, the 37, 26, and 18, represent where kids are at this point in time, or as of last week, skill-wise, given their grade. And the exam for ELA is at the end of March. So right now, we're sort of analyzing data, ensuring that we're positioning ourselves to support those students that are close and need a little more support, as well as our students who are well below and just need more support over the long term. Yeah, so that's the work right now over the coming month. Sorry if I stole your thunder there, Melissa. You may have wanted to mention that.
No, no worries. We're going to look at math now. Same series of charts, percentage proficiency levels by grade level, with 3 and 4 being proficient. So what we see here across the top, our goals are 30 for our 6th grade, 33 for our 7th, and 35% for our 8th grade. No grade is at the proficiency level or within our 5% close bar just yet, given this data. Again, this is a year-end assessment, and this assessment is given even later than the ELA assessment. So we are not yet there. Late April. We're not yet there, but again, those benchmarks are looking at year-end assessments. We'll go into some reasons we think about why. Similarly on growth, we see 8th grade growing at an average level, and 8th graders with IEPs have our highest SGB across all of it. But we do see two grade levels where we're not quite there with SGP, and 6th grade where our students with disabilities lag behind our students who do not have a classified disability. And so math limitations, we do want to mention that as far as I don't want to say quality of assessment, but the setting of assessment, there was, in the middle of kids taking a test, a Wi-Fi outage at the middle school. So kids stopped and started again. We can't actually quantify what kind of impact that might have on students testing, but we want to mention that it was there. And then we intend to compare our internal math assessments, which are wrapping up tomorrow. Thursday, tomorrow, at the, I'm struggling to keep track of what day of the week it is. Tomorrow at the middle school with these to make sure that the projections make sense. STAR has done some really good work in articulating why these exams are predictive of state assessment success, but there are some limitations. Kids can't use calculators, it's online instead of on paper. There's no actual like writing or computations that are assessed, so we do want to hold those two pieces next to each other and see if they look the same. And then so math conclusions, no middle school grade is currently at the proficiency goal of 30%. 8th grade is growing at an average level, with 8th graders with IEPs having the highest student growth percentile. We're 5% away from that goal for the year. And then 3 of our math classes did see a decrease in the number of students scoring at a percentage of students scoring at a level 1 from fall to winter. So those are students who are trending towards proficiency. They moved out of that level 1 bucket to the level 2 bucket.
And just to add a bit more here, so going back to 2019, CST 13, the average proficiency level was 29%. Our goal is actually, I think it's 30% for sixth grade, 32%, 33% in the seventh grade, and 35% in the eighth grade for math. So a bit of variation by grade. So on average, we're looking for a third of our students to score proficiently this year, which would be just beyond the district comparison. CST 16, where again, most of our students or a greater number of our students reside. In 2019, 19% of students scored proficiently. And so gives you some context for kind of where we are now with 2 months to go before kids sit for the exam, and where our comparisons lie.
So some next steps with middle school STAR results. After using this data after school, small group tutoring is being instituted. This and IA data by ELA and math teachers. I believe those are extra tutoring opportunities that exist with our faculty. Mock exam results are mock exams for ELA were last week and math this week. So they're going to be assessed in conjunction with STAR results. We're going to put those pieces next to each other and see where they agree and where we might have seen students either overperform or underperform comparatively to these to pinpoint high priority standards that need to be retaught. And then test prep units of study will be taught in March and April with test prep as a genre, students really digging into those exams. So while students may have been proficient or not on standards that they saw or even didn't see yet, they have not encountered this as test taking skills as they've been working on this in their own novels or readings in more authentic math units of study. So now students will really be digging into this as a skill. And then third round of STAR assessments will be administered in late May, and we'll be able to assess the year-long growth then. And then some questions for this. We asked the SLC, but for this team as well. Any key takeaways or things that we should keep in mind as we're planning? All right, I'm going to roll into the IA results. These are, again, our internal assessments. They are designed backwards from our end-line assessments. And this is our first big check of the year. We did IA1, but those were given in class. Those resembled more like a unit exam that you've probably taken in high school or even college. And these were 3-hour long sit-down tests, pen to paper, in real testing conditions. The first time students have done this in 2 years. So
we're throwing lots of data at you. And so what you just saw was middle school STAR results. The STAR is like an external exam that we give 3 times a year to assess growth. We're also now in-house having students experience mock exams, which are like the real thing for the middle school. We're going to provide out findings for that next month. We're now just analyzing the results yesterday, today, and even administering math today and yesterday. We're now going to move into kind of high school results where like at the high school level, kids take Regents in June and they take AP exams in May. So we're going to kind of pivot over to that terrain. We probably should provide a visual of some kind so you get a sense of like where all these exams fit in and how they're coherent with one another.
Yeah. This is to help us assess our progress towards those online assessments and get a picture for how students have learned so far. And then we've talked about this purpose. You've seen this slide before, but the 3 things we're trying to do here. 1, we taught kids stuff. This is what's on the exams. How have they done when they put it all together? 2, predictive for end of year exam performance, because they are modeled off after those end of year exams and structure. And then we set aside time for teachers to do some concerted planning from these exams so that we can have the strongest instruction possible. And then when we last met, I think Jake asked us to like think about what we actually expect to see, to do a little bit of prediction. And Earl, you like contextualized for us a little bit before too. So as I said before, this was the first time students took a sit down timed exam in 2 years. For our youngest students, they'd never taken a timed exam because in middle school exams are a little bit more time neutral. So we fully always expect between 9 and 1 to see scores decrease a little bit because it's double the content and 3 times or twice as much time in a true test taking setting. So it gets a little more formative. And then in this case, it's 2 years since our last instruction. We decreased the number and the type of accommodations that students receive, students who've displayed that they need them or students who have IEPs. So it might go from a shorter assessment in the first side to a second one with kind of a test taking guide to a third one with only extended time or a separate space. And then we were remote in December and January. We fully stand by the idea that that allowed us for more instructional minutes per child than many of their peers were getting. But it means that they weren't practicing in the way that these tests mostly looked. A couple kids did have to take them online if they were isolating, but these were pen and paper tests, and then kids were remote, so doing online work in December and January, so a shift. And here's what we actually saw. I'll orient folks to results. You've seen a chart like this before, but moving from left to right, we've got our 18 and 19 results for all students as well as students with disabilities. Here we're looking at proficiency by subject. So the percent of students who scored at the proficient band or higher. On IA1, again, that shorter in-class assessment, we have what all students scored. And then next to that, highlight in red, how students scored on IA2. I've indicated if we saw a dip, a rise, or staying neutral in a parenthetical next to that. And then on IA1 for our students with disabilities, and IA2 for our students with disabilities. And next to that at the very end is our targets for this year and our targets for students with disabilities. So I'll let everyone look there. Any questions on this slide? And then this one here is for our AP facing courses set up very similarly. We do not include the students with disabilities who take our AP classes on this slide because it is fewer than in the regions facing courses, and the number of students varies greatly by course from a similar percentage to a smaller percentage. We'll move on to headlines, I think, Josh. So the majority of our courses are on track to meet Regents or AP goals given longer, more challenging assessments. And while the actual standards taught tend to be ones that have been covered, the structure of courses, say writing a long essay in ELA or one of our history courses, that's an end of the year goal. So that is, we are pleased that the majority of our courses are on track. And then another thing we were pleased about, we did see growth in courses where we've added more supports through consistent teachers and learning specialists. So Global 2 gained a learning specialist this quarter. In living environment, we've had challenges staffing that class, but we've moved into a structure where our science team is covering that and our principal is planning, and that has allowed us to add some stability there, and we saw growth. And then despite it being their first ever timed exam, our 9th graders are close to meeting goals in all of their courses. So we're hopeful that with more practice with the structure, they will get there. We do have a couple of concerns. In ELA, our department chair is no longer working with us at Unity. And there were some challenges with the reliability of the data, like accurate inputting into our data system. know and putting it into our data system for our first IA. However, for AP exams, which were aligned to AP tests, and our teachers teaching those classes are experienced, so that data was pretty accurate. Though we didn't see students meeting our goals yet, many students are close to passing. They're in that kind of bubble space. So we have we're hoping that working on strategy and stamina with those kids will really pay off. And then for US history, we saw a dip and students far from where we want them to be. That is a new exam. It is yet to be administered in the format that it will be administered in, aligned to Common Core standards. And the essay portion was newer to kids. So they just learned that structure and they hadn't practiced it very much. So it was a lot more rigorous than the practice they've been doing. So we're also hoping that with practice, those students will go up. We talked about this a little bit because IA1 was more of a formative assessment. The percent proficient from 1 to 2 doesn't perfectly represent an apples to apples comparison. And then some actions and next steps in response to these concerns. I will be supporting teachers directly in our ELA department, and will be managing assessment directly. I've usually worked more with the outputs, the data that's come out, and planning from that, but I will also be developing the assessment tools for our mock examinations and putting them into our data system. For US history, students are getting regular direct instruction and formative assessment opportunities around that long essay. And then testing fidelity, we've got one more mock in about a month, full exam conditions from signing the attestation, signs on the door, etc. So we'll see if we see some growth between the two. So writ large, high school STAR is wrapping up. It actually wrapped up last Friday, and we are working on analyzing the data now. Middle school mocks are wrapping up this week, and high school mocks are happening the week of the 21st. And we're starting tutoring. So any lingering questions from this team or recommendations that you could provide? I know it was a lot. Sorry, we held back too.
Jeanette, is there anything you'd add in comparison to what we discussed on Thursday?
No, I thought that was helpful.
Cool. So I think with that concludes the committee share out. We've got no associate board members here tonight. So I think we can move on from that and move right into minutes. And we do have quorum. I'll let you do the honor, Mario.
Sure, yeah, we need to approve the minutes of Jeanette. Do you have which ones they are? Because I'm sorry, I don't have them in front of me.
Yes, they are. January 18th.
The minutes from the January meeting. Okay, all right, thank you. Any comments that haven't been reflected yet from anyone on the call? No, otherwise everyone in favor of approving the minutes of the January 18th meeting of the board? Lenny, can I get a vote?
I was waiting for you to call the question of abstaining. I wasn't part of it.
Okay, then I think we'll just put them back to the next month. I don't think we.
You're the last. So in terms of quorum, Lenny, I think you're the one. So we can if you abstain here, that's fine.
Quorum.
Yeah, but wait, to have a quorum as per Robert's rules, you can take a vote. It will show that I voted. So therefore, the majority of the vote is how you proceed. The majority is yes, you move forward.
Go back. I think if 3 out of the 4 voting approve, we might be okay. Otherwise, we'll just put it back to next month. Let's just check.
So for the record, I abstain. That's my vote.
Good. Got it.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Looks like we had a veteran here with regard to committee meetings.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So I think with that, we move into public comment. I think we're probably good there. And then a review or preview of the next meeting. And I think next meeting in March, we'll talk about mock results, our progress toward preparing kids for the state exams. We probably won't have high school results at that time. That'll be an April report out. And then we'll have a lot of the same updates that we had tonight with regard to all things Unity, staffing, student recruitment, all good stuff. So another busy meeting in March.
What's the date of the March meeting, Josh?
Good question.
15th?
15th?
I believe that's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think with that, that would